went to a wedding.
No.
Okay. No, I know who you are.
Under staff announcement, I've got a slide that we're going to put up. Just a handful of announcements.
If they want to do it, that's where you get one thing.
So just so you're aware.
It's kind of the end, yeah. I think it's gotta be like.
So that's your upcoming meeting.
I've actually
understanding.
8 hours. Typically, I have 3, 4, maybe 5 hours.
Straightforward.
Actually, it's gonna be nice to see.
It's just freezing. It's just literally freezing. It's like, yeah, 50, 40,
I did it on purpose.
45. This is spring. Remember,
Some out there.
The one thing I always tell people to put in perspective is our average last day of frost
Very good.
is May 17th.
is it, that's the average? I know you're not supposed to play a lot of I do it now. I go to Home Depot, can't help it.
Yeah.
One slice of it.
Yeah, it's usually Mother's Day. We got what, 8 flowers.
I'm taking vacation from work today, so shopping. I will.
Yeah, when we first got married.
Pretty well, what I did junior, I do, so pretty much empty nester. 90% of the time.
Hey, did you go to school with, it's just John?
Better than I deserve.
No, don't say that.
The mom was.
We deserve all the
Well,
other
the mom was
relations.
in charge of society. He was the historical society downstairs. Down in the town hall.
How about tomorrow?
That you would love to be that.
Oh.
Honestly, we have people that are in their seventies, eighties, and then we have a group of people who are so It was
Phase 1 and Phase 2 finally.
so much fun.
I started working on this in 2009.
And they're having a great time.
I got the first phase approved in 2001.
I would never have from the kids at Historic Preservation Commission.
Which is now
Started
phase
20
4.
years ago.
Oh, really?
But people
I look back at what Gary Evers, right? Gary.
yeah.
But, you know, things need to be accessible, there's little money over there. You have all these physical, great pictures from.
Yes, 1492. And even put them online.
He did. Then he started shaking. Everybody started shaking.
And the other interesting thing is, you know, when my dad was there, council, yeah, maybe in the 70s, whatever, so they did an interview, a live interview.
Did you put that there? No, and I was like, oh, I have no idea who put that there. It was yesterday. I'll celebrate all week.
Let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll begin with self-introductions. I'm Kevin Breitsky, the Porter County Surveyor and Chairman of this committee.
Tom Vanderwood with Nursing Staff.
Flora Palm, Nursing Staff.
Kane Nelson, Northwest Indiana Forum.
Bob Thompson, City of Valparaiso.
Mark Mandel, Town of Chesterton.
Jeff Hewitt, Town of Sherrville.
Tom Schmidt, Town of Sherrville.
Dean Button, City of Hammond. Happy birthday.
Yeah,
Thank you. I don't know who did that, and then I thought, oh, the YouTube people don't even know it's my birthday. But yes, I turned 70 yesterday.
Happy birthday, Kay.
Happy birthday.
I know, thanks.
Ryan Lissick, Dry Clean, Indiana.
Mary Tanis, Town of Dyer.
Mr. Ross?
Doug Ross, representing Coastal Green today.
Thank you.
Meredith Stillwell, Nursing. Jenna Ambrose, Dry Clean, Indiana.
Alex Lister, Public Farm and Cypress.
Jenny Monroe, VS Indiana. Jen Birchfield, Nursing Staff. Grace Benninger, Nursing Staff. Elizabeth Bench, Carrier and Gable.
Terry Martin, Carrie Gable. Charles Bradsky, Nursing Staff.
Stephen Hughes, Nursing Staff. Scott Weber, Nursing Staff.
Mitch Barloza, Nursing Staff.
Philip Evans, and
And we have Sandra Plum and Scott Sandstrom. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sandra Plum, and
Scott Sandstrom, Smith.
And they'll be speaking to us shortly. We have the minutes from the March 4th meeting. What's the preference of the committee? Any additions or corrections?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have one minor correction to the minutes. On page 3, under the list of project or project phases recommended to be included in the 2026 to 2030 tip. The last bullet point on page 3, bridge replacement, those projects are not were not recommended for inclusion. It was noted in the memo from that meeting that the funding was not, there wasn't sufficient funding to include those projects. So I would recommend that we amend the minutes accordingly.
So noted. First, agreed? Agreed. Second?
Agreed.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? So moved. Do we have any public comment today? I don't see anybody signed up. That doesn't mean we won't hear you, but calling for any public comment once, twice, thrice. Let's move on. We'll do the presentation that I just promised you from Scott Sandstrom and Sandra Plum. This will have to do with the Propel US 30 West study. And for the minutes, note David Wright is here from Garrett GTC.
I do have paper copies of the slides if anyone wants that. I can pass them around. All right, thank you. My name is Scott Sandstrom with CDM Smith. I'm the study manager working with INDOT on the Propel US 30 West study. Thank you for having us here today to speak with you. All right. So if you're not aware, the Propel studies together include 180 miles along US 30 and US 31. The US 30 West study, circled in green there, begins at State Road 49 in Valparaiso and extends to Beach Road in Marshall County, and then also continues south on US 31 to County Road 700 in Fulton County. As part of this collaborative process, our study team has been engaging the public and study stakeholders over the last 2 years, and it's been a vital part of the success of the study, and it will help and inform and guide the next 20 plus years of transportation investments in the corridor. We don't anticipate that the Pell studies will identify or recommend a single build alternative. The studies create a reasonable set of alternatives that could move forward as part of NDOT's regular call for projects, which is typically a 5-year timeline. Here's the schedule. We started back in 2022. We're now nearing the conclusion here in 2025. We completed the draft level 3 report back in November, and that's primarily what I'll be talking to you about today with a little bit of updates. But we're hoping to finish the studies here soon. Oops, skip one. So the level 3 screening process was an 8-step process that started with defining planning segments, moved through defining improvement packages, and then evaluated the improvement packages to come to some recommendations and ratings. I'll cover each of these steps a little bit more. So step 1 was to define the planning segments. In US 30 West, we had 15 of these. And essentially, a planning segment was a section of roadway that functions as a system to provide access and mobility within a geographic area. And it allowed us a digestible chunk to analyze throughout the relatively large corridor. So like I said, we had 15 planning segments. And we basically decided on these based on a few criteria. We looked at which intersections function together, which intersections would be influenced if an improvement was done at a neighboring intersection, where does the land use change, where does the traffic patterns change, things like that to come up with these different segments. And we named them by a geographic area just to help identify. So once the planning segments were defined, we moved on to improvement packages. And an improvement package is a combination of intersection improvements and facility type, which together act as an alternative for a segment. So you can think of these just as alternatives. And we had multiple improvement packages for each of the planning segments, somewhere between 3 and 6, plus the no build. When we created these improvement packages, first we looked at the influence of intersection concepts on adjacent intersections. We looked at access management principles. We also looked at secondary intersections. In the level 2 analysis, which was the step before level 3, we looked at primary intersections along the corridor, and there were 29 of those. There were major collectors and above. So the rest of the intersections we also looked at now in level 3 to tie together into the segments. And then we also looked at interchange spacing guidelines. So when interchanges were considered, for instance, in rural areas, NDOT prefers at least 3 miles for non-interstate routes between interchanges. A major consideration in the creation of these improvement packages was the level of access management. So the graphic on this slide shows you the balance between mobility and access for different facility types. So obviously a local street, there's a lot more access but less mobility, all the way up to a freeway where you have kind of maximum mobility with the least amount of access. For our study area, all the study areas, US 30 and 31 are considered major arterials. So as shown in the graphic, this typically has more mobility and less access than other facility types. And we do have over 150 driveways currently with direct access to US 30 or 31 in our study area. And many of these don't meet NDOT's current access management guidelines. So while these driveways are important for access, they can impact the safety and operations of the roadway. And so the challenge for us was to provide safety improvements, which sometimes reduce or eliminate this access, while also still providing acceptable access across into US 30 and 31. And the level 3 screening, we did identify a range of facility types that can be applied to the study area. So between major arterial, which it is now, up to freeway, including expressway and expressway light, which I'll talk about later. So now that we had our packages, the next few steps were evaluating those packages. Safety and mobility were 2 of the ways. The safety performance of each improvement package was determined through a multi-step process that started with identification of conflict points. Conflict points represent locations where vehicle paths intersect at driveways, intersections, and interchanges. Reductions in conflict points are often associated with improvements in safety, as fewer conflict points typically result in fewer locations where crashes can occur. Mobility analysis looked at travel time along US 30 and 31. We also looked at access and crossing points in the different packages in the sense of how much distance between each would be present in each package. We looked at changes in cross-corridor mobility as it relates to the distance between crossing points, and we also looked at driveway impacts. We also refined some conceptual designs and came up with planning level cost estimates. The costs are presented in the report as a range due to the conceptual and planning nature of the study. And these costs will likely change with more detail becomes available. However, they do provide a useful way to relatively compare the improvement packages in each planning segment. We also looked at analyzing each package against the known environmental constraints. So things like wetlands, those type of deals. The potential impacts presented in the level 3 screening are preliminary, but we did look at how they might impact the environmental resources. Also in our study area, we looked at things like railroads, because there is the parallel railroad and at-grade crossings in the 30 West study. We also had study goals, and these were a result of public feedback in the beginning of the Pell study, and they're a reflection of that public input. And so the goals that we rated each package against were economic development, transportation for all, multimodal access and connections, emerging technologies, fiscal and environmental practicality, corridor character, and local access. So after we completed the analysis piece, we were able to, in the draft report, look at each improvement package and give it a rating. Some packages were eliminated, and this meant the package, although it met the purpose and need, it is considered unreasonable when compared to the other packages due to limited benefits compared to its impacts or costs. Some packages were carried forward. This meant the improvement package met the purpose and need. However, in comparison to others, the improvement package is considered to have marginal benefits. And finally, some packages were recommended in the draft report, and these packages met they met the purpose and need, and they were considered to be among the best within the planning segment at addressing the needs without extraordinarily high costs or impacts. But I do want to just remind everyone, at this time, no decisions have been made about the future of US 30 or 31 in the Propel US 30 West study, and no projects related to the Pell have been funded by NDOT. A stated goal of the Pell study process is the identification of a range of reasonable alternatives. And given the needs identified within the study area, a reasonable alternative could consist of an improvement at a single intersection. It could consist of improvement at a series of intersections and the roadway sections in between them. And depending on multiple factors, including statewide priorities and funding availability, improvements considered as part of the Pell study could be combined in different ways in the future to address the identified transportation needs and support the goals. So the packages that we show could be mixed and matched in the future. Here's an example of one of the segments. This is Wanata. It's also segment 2, we called it. It goes from LaPorte Porter County line on the west side to west of County Road 700 in LaPorte County. And all of the packages or all of the segments, I should say, were organized similarly, with the packages starting with high access, low cost, low impact, ranging to low access, higher cost, higher impact. So typically that meant it was arterial, expressway, freeway in that order. One of the things we did want to specifically point out is the expressway light. I had mentioned that earlier. This was developed in direct response to public comments. So residences, businesses, and other local stakeholders requested improved mobility through reduction or elimination of traffic signals without sacrificing accessibility to and from US 30 and 31. So after considering these comments, NDOT developed the expressway light facility type to combine driveway access aspects of an arterial with increased access management of an expressway. But unlike an expressway, the expressway light facility type would allow right-in, right-out driveway access. It could also include properly spaced and designed median U-turn openings at select locations to reduce distances drivers may have to go to turn around. So that was one of the packages in the Wanata segment as an example. For all of the packages that were carried forward or recommended in the draft report, we created videos, which I'll play now. It's just a short video to try to help the public understand what we were sharing in the report. Not sure if there's the sound working. It'll still show generally what we're talking about though. So each of the videos starts with just a summary of the segment, essentially. So in this case, this was segment 2, Wanata. 5 miles, 11 intersections, talks about the land use, talks about some developments that people may know, so it tries to help the public realize, okay, they're talking about, yeah, this area. And that's in all of the videos for each segment, and then it moves on to show the different improvements, like kind of a flyover video, showing the conceptual design of the improvements at each intersection for that particular package. This package shown is package 4, which was expressway light in the draft report. And there is pleasant music and sound. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing since the draft report, and it includes looking at some revisions, particularly to this segment as well. So we would update the video when that's published with the changes.
So does this package represent just one of the alternatives that were still under consideration, or is this the preferred alternative?
There's no preferred alternatives. In essence, there's going to be multiple alternatives that move forward. So this was one of those. Yeah.
So it's not considered the preferred alternative per se, but it is the alternative that's moving.
There's going to be multiple alternatives moving forward.
So for this particular segment,
there's three, I think.
Okay.
3 packages, yeah, and this is one of them. Yeah, and so this is Expressway Light, so it was both free flow, but it still allowed driveway access. That was essentially the difference between trying to get different characteristics of different facility types. Since
You're
go ahead.
eliminating the crossovers.
Yeah, it's actually, I was gonna.
So how do, if I'm coming westbound, how do I get to Old Port County Road 800?
Yeah, it's a good question because that's definitely one of the comments we heard a lot, obviously, during our public meetings. And so that's one of the things we're looking into now as we're revising the draft report. However, in the Expressway Light, there is the intent of having U-turn opportunities at different locations. So it might not be at the intersection, it might be somewhere else, but you'd be able to turn around so it wouldn't be, you're stuck going 10 miles in one direction.
Kind of looks that way, and given the general public doesn't have your knowledge, if you're doing this on a presentation, you'll get more people like me asking stupid questions on how to
No,
get
it's
around.
not a stupid question. And yeah, we did have that discussion a lot.
Good question. We have issues with law enforcement also. We need those crossings.
Didn't think of that, it's because I tried
Emergency
to speech.
services.
Yep, so perfect segue. So since the report was published in November, we received over 200 comments, about 250 in our study area. The top things we heard included a desire for the no bill. This was especially prevalent in communities, comments received from rural communities. And I think it ties into the second one, which was community access. Most folks use US 30 as a vital connection for their daily local trips, so keeping access on and off for these trips was viewed as a vital concern. This also related to emergency, vehicle access, and school access, as you mentioned. And then our third theme we heard was just related to safety, and making sure to improve safety along the corridor as it relates to the intersections and also travel speed. So out of the 250 comments we did receive, during that 30-day comment period, about half were in regard to the Wanata planning segment. In particular, we heard that access for emergency vehicles and the general public across US 30 for Wanata residents in particular to connect the town is very important to them. There's also a strong desire for no build, mainly out of the concern for what improvements could do to the local's town character as well as economic impact. And I think also some of the no build is people seeing what you're saying and saying, well, how do I get it? How am I going to get across? How am I going to do this? I'd rather see nothing happen. So this is one of the areas we are looking at now for revisions to the draft report based on the public comment, in particular looking for an opportunity to allow some cross access in some areas. I should also say that that was one of the packages. There's other packages that have a lot more access. It's kind of a, there's different ways, to do it along the way, and there's different trade-offs for each. But so they weren't all that restrictive. But it is NDOT's intent within the Expressway Light facility type, like I said, to utilize crossovers for U-turn capabilities if it was to come to fruition, that particular package, in order to reduce the distance someone may have to travel from a right-in, right-out intersection in order to turn around. We're also looking at some other revisions in other segments, but this one I felt was most pertinent to this group. Yeah.
Just curious, the 200 public comments received were only for the Wanata section?
No, that was for our entire study, US 30
The entire study area,
Yeah.
but half of them came from just the one.
Yep. They became very organized and concerned at that time when they saw the packages.
To build on Don's question, the balance of the 150, were they all within the project area, or did you get them from way outside the project area?
They were mostly within the project area. There might have been a few strays, but yeah, pretty much everyone lived or worked in the project area. We've been holding community office hours, so along with our public meetings we've had along the way, we've had these monthly. The May 13th one actually is changing. I learned that this morning, so I didn't have time to change it, but so ignore that one. It's going to be in Knox somewhere, but different day. The Valparaiso one is good on May 20th, and then June we'll be announcing soon. So these are basically for anyone from the public to come in, ask questions, see the videos, see the report. Members of the study team are at these. Also, PropelUS30.com is the best place to go for all the resources, all the reports, all the videos, our past public meeting materials. So I encourage you to go there if you have other questions. Oops. But that is all I had, so any other questions or comments?
Do we have any questions or comments? I think one important thing is this is a planning document. It's not the plan.
That's right.
So it's to keep in mind, and there's plenty of opportunities to still speak out because it's not a funded plan.
That's
at this
right.
point.
Yep.
And I keep encouraging them to do the same study, but go from Valparaiso west to the Illinois line,
Yeah.
because that's even a more troubled corridor, in my opinion.
Sure.
But one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Who makes up the oversight committee or task force or driving this?
So at INDOT, the main players, Sandra and Jonathan are the project managers, and then the subject matter experts involved, Dan McCoy, the Director of Traffic Engineering, Laura Hilden, Director of Environmental Services, Roy Nunnally, Director of Planning, and forgetting one. Who am I forgetting? Nobody? Okay. Those are the main players at INDOT, and then Federal Highway as well has been involved, coordinated with.
I recall years ago that there was a community group that was pushing this, and community being all sorts of different elected officials.
There's coalitions, US 30 Coalition, you might
That's
be thinking of, and 31 Coalition. They're a stakeholder involved. They've been informed along the way and taken their input. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Scott.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. We'll move on to planning, resolution 2508, fiscal year 26, Unified Planning Work Program approval. That's on pages 5 to 8 of your packet. Underwood will present. And there is a link to this. And we're going to be requesting an action to recommend to the commission next meeting, the 15th.
Thank you. Yes, as Chairman Brightsky noted, there is the full document was linked to in the agenda packet that was published online on our website. And on pages 5 and following, we do have a memo that's describing the fiscal year 26 Unified Planning Work Program. Through the remainder of this presentation, I will refer to it as the UPWP. The UPWP for NERC and for all metropolitan planning organizations is one of the core planning documents which is required by the U.S. Department of Transportation. And it serves essentially 3 functions. One, it is our work plan for the staff of the MPO, which is NERC. It includes a program of all of our planning tasks over the next fiscal year. So this document would take effect beginning in July of this year, 2025, through June of 2026. And it's also a financial planning document linking staff activities to funding sources. So it includes budget tables, which identifies and lists how the MPO, NERC, is using our federal planning funding in order to accomplish the purposes of the MPO. So it addresses basically 3 things, basically 2 things. First, it addresses the surface transportation issues that we've identified as most important here in Northwest Indiana. So it reflects the plans and programs and policies of this agency, and then it also addresses the priorities of our federal funding agencies. So this is primarily funded through federal funding, and we incorporate whatever the priorities of the current administration are into our work. And so in our state, Indiana, we adopt an MPO we adopt a UPWP every 2 years. So last year we adopted the fiscal year 25 and 26 UPWP. And then every other year we adopt a major amendment. So this is the FY26 UPWP, but it's basically an amendment to the document that we had adopted last year. And so what you'll find is that the 1-year amendment is pretty much the same as the 2-year document. It's just updated with actual budget numbers rather than estimates, some reflection of how tasks have or have not been accomplished, and so on. And I'll talk about that going forward. As I said, it's FY26 document is very similar to 25 to 26, which we're currently using. A few changes have been made. As I said, task budgets have been adjusted to reflect our actual FY26 funding, which in this case is actually slightly lower than what we received in 2025. That is a result of an adjustment in our statewide formula that apportions the planning funding to the different MPOs. So that formula was changed last year, and this is the first year that we're seeing that the impacts of that. I've noted in the memo actually the decrease. I believe it is approximately $77,000 in federal funding. We've also adjusted some of the timelines, so certain projects were completed, other projects weren't, so we have to roll them into the current year. And then another kind of major change of the document is that in years past, we've always included what are called planning emphasis areas, which is that list of federal planning priorities. This year, given the change in federal priorities and sort of the dramatic cuts to the staff at the FTA and the Federal Highway Administration, they have advised us to remove all references to planning emphasis areas. So what that means is we're basically just using what are the planning factors which have been established in federal legislation rather than any kind of administrative direction through the PEAs. And then we've also removed any references to rescinded executive orders. Probably the most significant of these is the 1991 Executive Order on Environmental Justice, which has guided a lot of our work in terms of analysis. And that's been removed. In its place, we're basically just using, again, federal, or actually adopted legislation rather than sort of these executive orders. So we will still continue to do demographic analysis as part of our work, but we just won't reference that executive order anymore. And then again, in accordance with current executive orders, we've been advised to remove any tasks that specifically are associated with climate change and greenhouse gases. So we did have one task that was focused on that. We have removed it. We've actually modified it a bit so that it looks kind of at air quality more broadly. So the layout of the document is as shown on your screen. This is a template that INDOT provides us with and that we work with. So each one of these sections has a number of tasks. And we provide in the document an estimate of how much funding we'll be using for each task. As you can see, the primary funding sources are federal metropolitan planning funds, which is called PL, and Section 5303 transit planning funds. We receive those through INDOT as part of what they call the consolidated planning grants. FY25, so that's I think there's a typo there. It should say FY26. we've actually are receiving $2.3 million in FY '26. Again, those grants are 80% federal, and we match them with 20% local funding. And then in addition to that consolidated planning grant, we also are able to transfer funding from our highway program. We call those funds flex funds. And basically those are taken out of the transportation improvement program, and we can use them for specific planning projects that are in line with the funding priorities of those specific programs. So historically, we've always flexed funding out of the CMAQ program to support our air quality education, including funding of Drive Clean Indiana. More recently, we are flexing Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, HSIP funds, to conduct road safety audits in partnership with local governments. And then we've also flexed funds out of the STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, to fund our regional TIP software, which we use to maintain our transportation improvement program. And then finally, another required element is that we include 2.5% of our funds be set aside for what has been defined as complete streets planning activities. And those activities are very broad, but they focus primarily on active transportation, non-motorized transportation. And we are using that in FY '26, which is approximately $57,000, to fund active transportation planning, including technical assistance, data collection and analysis, and public engagement. That'll basically just fund staff work in those areas. And then we have some additional special projects funded in the UPWP. The Marquette Greenway, which we'll hear a brief update on later. We have ready grant funds through the state, which are being used to match federal PL to support the implementation of a federal RAISE grant. Road safety audits, which I've already discussed. And then we do have funding, it's actually carryover funding from a previous year, which we will be using hopefully later this year, to do some LPA, local public agency planning assistance. This would be corridor plans, complete street plans, etc., completed in partnership with local governments. So I will take any questions if there are any. Yes, Steve?
Could you go back to the detailed table, which I think was on page 6 or 5? Thanks. Could you address the line item 5307 FTA funding?
Oh, yes.
700.1. What's that?
So that is that's a portion of the 5307 transit funding, which we receive as part of the Chicago urbanized area. Every year we receive an apportionment of funds, which we split with Illinois and Wisconsin. We then take whatever portion of the split that we have, and we divide it up between the transit operators, or the direct recipients, I should say, in the Chicago urban area. That would be NICD, GPTC, and NERC. And a portion of the funds that NERC receives is used for administration of basically grants and other activities for our sub-recipients, which are all the smaller transit operators in the Chicago urban area, which is Lake County and a portion of Porter County.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? Not, do I have a motion?
Take a motion to recommend approval to the full commission.
For resolution 2508.
For resolution 2508. Thank you.
I'll second that nomination.
We have a first and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Thank you. Thank you. I will move on to items 4.2, 4.3. First, the public comment report on air quality conformity determination report for NWI 2050 plus amendment number 2 in the fiscal year 2026-2030 transportation improvement program. Scott Weber. Afterward, Scott will be presenting on resolution 2509, the adoption of the air quality conformity determination, and that report's on pages 12 to 13. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to talk about Resolution 2509, which refers to the air quality conformity determination document for the NWI 2050 plus, which is our long-range plan for the whole region, amendment number 2, as well as our anticipated upcoming, which you'll hear about more later in this meeting, the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 transportation improvement program. Because we are an area of non-attainment or maintenance agency, we have to go through this air quality conformity determination document. Now, the whole report is just linked in your agenda packets. It's not printed out because it's about a 50-page report. So you won't see that, but the memo that you'll find starting on pages 9 to 10 describes the air quality conformity process, and this presentation will refer to that. So, go to the next slide here. So why do we need to do air quality conformity determination? Well, as I kind of alluded to earlier, portions of our Northwest Indiana region are designated as non-attainment for ozone, which is one of the criteria pollutants from the Clean Air Act that the EPA is allowed to regulate. So specifically, there are 5, for the 2015 standard, there are 5 townships in Lake County, the 5 northernmost townships, and 8 townships in Porter County. Also, the northern 2/3 of the townships in Porter County have been designated as non-attainment for the 2015 standard. However, we still have to keep in mind the older standards as well, because those still apply for at least a 20-year maintenance period. So for the 2008 standard, the whole entirety of Lake and Porter counties are still designated as maintenance. We've already met the requirements, but we're still maintaining them for at least a 20-year period. And also, which hasn't quite expired yet, is that LaPorte County is still a maintenance area for the 1997 standard. Now, Lake and Porter counties were as well, but they're superseded by these newer standards. But LaPorte County is still considered a maintenance area for the 1997 standard. So this is all required by the Clean Air Act Section 176C, and that means that any new transportation improvement programs, of which the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 transportation improvement program that we hope to recommend today needs to meet the conformity requirements because there are non-attainment or maintenance areas in the area of the new tip. So what does a conformity report show? Well, basically, I mean, it shows a lot, but I'll try to simplify it to the main 2 things that I think it shows. One is that it shows that NERC has collaborated in a collaborative process with our interagency consultation group partners. So those include NERC, as well as these other agencies that you'll see on the screen. So the Indiana Department of Transportation, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, FTA, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, US EPA. And basically, the conformity report needs to show that certain projects in this new TIP, this new Transportation Improvement Program, do not cause exceedances. So that means that implementing regionally significant, non-exempt projects does not cause or contribute to the ozone precursor emissions, which are NOx, nitrous oxides, and VOC, which are volatile organic compounds, at or above their specified motor vehicle emissions budgets in the state implementation plan. So ozone isn't produced directly, it comes from these precursor emissions, NOx and VOC, which are emitted by on-road vehicles, among other sources, but conformity deals with these on-road vehicle sources. And then they mix in the atmosphere with sunlight and warmth, and they produce ground-level ozone. So that's what we're trying to show, is that the new projects that we model as from this new transportation improvement program do not result in us exceeding our allowances in the motor vehicle emissions budgets. So the report itself went through a 30-day public comment period. This was required by our NWI, Engage NWI, our public participation plan. So that 30-day period was from March 22nd to April 20th. There were 3 public meetings held. There's actually only 1 that's required, but we did hold 3 public meetings on April 10th at the Porter County Government Center in Valparaiso, on April 15th at the Maryville branch of the Lake County Public Library, and on April 16th at the Michigan City Public Library. So we went to each of the 3 counties. We did not receive any comments from the general public. However, we did receive 2 comments from Federal Highway after our public comment period began. And those kind of pertain to, they wanted us to include project lengths where possible in the description. Originally, we did not specify necessarily what the length was in miles. We just had beginning and end point. And they wanted to ensure that all the projects listed in that conformity document were also listed in the Transportation Improvement Program, because that's one of the federal requirements. And so we just confirmed that that was the case with them. We did add the lengths as noted, as it was addressed. And that's also noted in your public comment report on page 11 of your agenda packets. So basically, at the end of the day, do we demonstrate conformity through this report? And yes, we show that ozone precursor emissions expected to result from implementing the regionally significant non-exempt projects in the fiscal years 2026 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program, and Lake and Porter counties are at or below the motor vehicle emissions budgets in the state implementation plan for the required analysis years. So this table shows the required analysis years. You'll notice some years are actually in the past, and that's because they're still codified in the state implementation plan, so we still have to kind of backcast the results. But most of them are in the future. And for each of these years, you'll find with the green check marks that the lower number is lower than or equal to the above number. So that means that the emissions are below the budgets for both NOx, nitrous oxides, and volatile organic compounds for each of these required analysis years when we went through the modeling process. So I know that's a mouthful to digest here. But so the requested action that staff would like to entertain considering is that a recommendation of resolution 25-09, which you'll find on pages 12 to 13 of your agenda packets. Recommendation of that document to the NERC Executive Board and full commission on May 15th, next Thursday, that we demonstrate air quality conformity for NWA 2050 Plus Amendment number 2, as well as the upcoming fiscal years 2026 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program. And I also just want to make it, there was one technical typo correction that we do anticipate making between the document. It's actually not printed in your packet, but it's in that link in your agenda packet. There was a table on 5.2.1 on page 9 of the report where we left out a row for the population, number of households, and employment for the year 2020. So we do intend to fill that in, just technical correction before the commission meeting. But I don't believe we need to specify that in this motion. And then also I just wanted to make note that this is a prerequisite for adopting the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program. So that new tip cannot go into effect until Federal Highway Administration formally signs the conformity determination letter, which we will, once we have that commission meeting next Thursday, it usually takes about 35 to 40 days for the Federal Highway Administration to review the document before they issue their formal letter. So that's the earliest that we can expect that our new Transportation Improvement Program would go into effect. Technically, it doesn't start till July 1st, so we should be just about okay here. So that's the only other information. Are there any questions, or I'm happy to answer? Yes.
When I look at this and I know we have 2 new commissioners, one for IDEM and one for NDOT. And I'm hoping that they will back us, because when I look at the charts, I see that Lake and Porter County don't even come near the levels of things that the federal government objects to. And I'm hoping that we can move toward, together with NERC, to get rid of the emissions requirements, because it passed in the General Assembly this year. We need to move in that direction, definitely, because that emissions testing is just ridiculous for people to go through emotionally, financially, and I would like to see us move away from that.
Thank you for your comment. I know they're ongoing priorities in the legislature, so thank you for expressing those.
Any other questions, comments? Not, do I have a motion?
Also move to recommend resolution 2509 to the NERC Executive Board full commission for the May 15th meeting.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Schmidt. Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? So moved. Won't go anywhere, Mr. Weber. We'll have public comment report on NWI 2050 plus amendment number 2, pages 14 to 15. And then Scott will address resolution 2510, adoption of NWI 2050 plus amendment number 2, which is pages 16 to 18.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, once again. So on page 14, you'll find the memo for NWI 2050 Plus Amendment Number 2. I alluded to it in my earlier presentation, but basically this is one of the core planning requirements that's required that we demonstrate conformity to, in addition to the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 tip, which you'll hear about from Mr. Baskey, Mr. Hughes later. So this is actually a much simpler document, so that's why I'm covering it here, because it's really a very short document. But it's still required, and I'll explain that in a second. And you'll find this one doesn't even have to be linked in your agenda packets. You'll find all of the text that's going into this amendment on page 18 specifically in your agenda packets. The resolution is starting on page 16. So I'll talk through the memo and kind of what it explains in this brief presentation. So why do we need an amendment to our long-range plan, NWA 2050 plus? Well, basically, there are kind of two streams of requirements here. So the first stream is that metropolitan planning organizations, in other words, that's what NERC is considered by the federal regulation, the TIP must be consistent with its long-range transportation plan, as required in 23 CFR 453.26. So this means that any transportation improvement program that we hope to adopt or that we maintain has to be consistent with our long-range transportation plan. So since we're seeking adoption of a new transportation improvement program, specifically the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 TIP, it may be required that we amend our long-range transportation plan in order to accommodate this new TIP. And also, it's just good practice for the amendment number 2 to this to NWA 2050 plus would clearly link this new fiscal year 2026 to 2030 transportation improvement program to the plan. But all of this said, this stream wouldn't necessarily require us to amend our long-range transportation plan if all of the projects that are in the new TIP would be already consistent with the NWA 2050 plus that we've already adopted. However, there's also a second stream, which is the air quality conformity requirements. And this means that since the new TIP, the fiscal year 2026 to 2030 transportation improvement program, contains any regionally significant non-exempt projects that are new or different in scope from the original list of regionally significant projects that we adopted in the plan as it stands now, as NWA 2050 plus stands now, that means that we must amend NWA 2050 plus before adopting the new TIP. And this has to come in order before we adopt the new TIP. So how are we actually amending NWA 2050 plus? Well, really, it actually boils down to just a technical change in wording to the reference date of the new air quality conformity determination. NWI 2050 plus doesn't contain an explicit list of projects. That's actually linked by reference to the air quality conformity document, which I just talked about earlier. So you'll see what we're actually changing as part of amendment number 2 on page 10, as noted in this table, to NWI 2050 plus. The original text specifies the air quality conformity determination date of February 20th, 2025, and we're going to change that to this new air quality conformity determination document, which is dated on May 15th, 2025. So that's really all we have to do in terms of changing the text of NWI 2050 plus in order to accommodate our new TIP. So, and that's really what the amendment is. As far as the public engagement that's required for an NWI 2050 plus amendment, there still is a 30-day public comment period required for an amendment. And so we went through the same public comment period as we did for the air quality conformity determination document. It was a 30-day period from March 22nd to April 20th. We held at the same 3 public meetings. However, there were no comments that directly addressed the NWI 2050 plus amendment number 2 to talk about here. So that's the public comment report. And that said, the requested action for Resolution 2510 is to recommend Resolution 2510 to the NERC Executive Board / Full Commission on May 15th, next Thursday, to amend NWI 2050 plus with amendment number 2. And the same caveat applies that our fiscal year 2026 to 2030 TIP cannot go into effect until Federal Highway formally signs the conformity determination letter, which usually takes about 35 to 40 days after the full commission meeting. there any questions?
Comments, questions, anybody? If not, can I have a motion for resolution 2510?
Move to recommend to the full commission resolution 25-10.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Topol. Any other discussion, comments, questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Signify by saying nay. Apparently it's all four. So moved. Let's go on. We'll recommend this to the commission. And the programming, section 5, Mr. Bradsky, we'll start with public comment of report for fiscal year 2026-2030 Transportation Improvement Program. That's on pages 18 to 25. And then followed by resolution 2511, fiscal year 2026-2030 Transportation Improvement Program, pages 26 to 27. There's also a link there. And the staff's recommendation is to recommend this to the commission for our 15th meeting on May. Mr. Bradsky.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be tag teaming this presentation with Stephen, so if you see us do a high five, that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
And much of what we've mentioned, Scott had talked about as far as the public participation, but it's in our presentation too, so we will discuss it also. So the 26 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program was produced and is out on our website for comment. Well, actually, comments are already completed, but for viewing. Some of the generalities, the what, when, who, why, and how. What, as you can see, NERC's short-range plan is for the next 5 years. These are projects we are actually funding and proposing that moves forward. This includes not just our projects that are funded by NERC managed federal funds and transit and highway funds, but also NDOT projects. The when, so we update this every 2 years, and it goes into effect with the fiscal year, the 26 to 2030 in this case. The who, US DOT, NDOT, RTA, NERC, Commission, local governments, transit operators, as well as the general public, all have input on this. Why? Because this is how our long-range plan is implemented. It's through the TIP. And how well, as you can see, we use the current federal transportation acts and other federal sources for funding. And we do work through the NERC NOFA, and that's issued every other year on an even number of years. So we had that in 2024, fall of 2024, and it'll get implemented here this summer, hopefully. Northwest Indiana urbanized areas, in case you didn't realize, there are 6 of them, and NERC manages funds for the 3 larger ones. That is the Chicago, Illinois, Indiana urbanized area. That's mainly Lake County and a good portion of Porter County. There's the Valparaiso Shorewood Forest urbanized area. It's mainly the Valparaiso, you can see that in the purple. And then the Michigan City, LaPorte is in the orange. And then there's 3 other smaller ones, smaller urbanized areas that NERC does not manage the funds for, but they are important in our reading. I'd like to point out that the Lake of the Four Seasons urbanized area, in previous years, that was part of the Chicago, Indiana, Illinois, Indiana urbanized area. But the way that the U.S. Census Bureau, as we discussed in previous transportation committees, have talked about it, so. And that has given us a little bit of heartburn, excuse me. Summary of the investments for Northwest Indiana. As you can see, we've got roadway bridge rehabilitation, we have air quality environment, we have complete streets planning, multi-use off-road trails, and new roadway and bridges. You can see how we've kind of broken all those out. There's also a tremendous transit portion. So we have the federal highways dollars, and then the Federal Transit Administration dollars that also come and fund us through. One of the big things that seem to be important this year, they're always important, but fiscal constraints. This table just shows you the different funding sources that we get of federal highway funds. And at the very bottom line is our balance at the end of the year. So you can see that we are not in the red on any year. And that is a big portion, that's a big concern for our federal highway partners.
And staff has done a good job of giving us direction and keeping us out of the red.
Right. As most of you know, we don't have the money, we can't write the check. So we are not like the federal government who can go into debt. So we have to make sure that we have, again, a balanced and constrained budget.
They do their thing, we do ours.
Right. So I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Hughes. I do want to point out, though, that there's a memorandum on page 19. If you haven't read it, it discusses in detail everything that we've discussed here. And then also the public comment report on page 23, again, goes in more in detail. So, Steve?
All right, good morning all. So I'm just going to talk real briefly on the transit projects in the TIP. Charles covered the 3 urbanized areas that we will be discussing. FTA funds come in, at least for our purposes, 4 varieties. There's urbanized area formula funds, which goes for any mode of transit. 5310, which is enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. So there are certain restrictions. You can probably guess what those are based on that funding category. 5337 is state of good repair for fixed guideway operators. In our region, NICD with the South Shore Rail Line is the only fixed guideway operator. And 5339 is eligible for use on bus and bus facilities. Those are going to be capital purchases. Breakdown on some numbers there. We've got, you'll see that the 5307 is something that's available in all 3 of our urban areas. The 5337 is available where NICD runs. So that's currently, obviously, the Indiana portion of the Chicago area and in the Michigan City LaPorte area. 5310 and 5339 are available to operators in certain operators in the Chicago urban area. However, it's not that they're not available in Valparaiso, Sherwood Forest, or Michigan City LaPorte. It's that those they have to go to the state of Indiana to, they're technically a competitive grant, but INDOT generally anticipates partial funding of those applications. And the application is mostly factual. What are you requesting? Will it be replacing a vehicle? Is it new? That sort of thing. So it's not like a challenge grant where there's a lot of fierce competition. So the transit program, we forwarded on the projects from the prior TIP in years 26 through 28. we carried those forward, and then we had made adjustments based on our anticipated funding. So when those projects were originally put into the TIP, the funding was a different ballpark. We had Valparaiso Sherwood Forest, urban area didn't exist yet, and so we were anticipating a slightly higher amount of money being available. Additionally, there have been changes to everybody's ridership is different than it was back in 22, which was different than in 20. So those funds got adjusted to meet fiscal constraint. And then the second thing that we do is we look at the way that we split those funds with NERC, GPTC, and NICD to say, okay, if one operator or direct recipient is asking for, say, $5 million worth of projects, but they only have $3 million worth of available funds, we make those adjustments as part of our process. And then in 29 and 30, we utilized that same methodology of looking at the split, but then saying, okay, the transit operators said we want operating assistance funded first, followed by preventive maintenance, and then capital as possible thereafter. And the preventive maintenance is an interesting category because when you keep up with your preventive maintenance, just like on your car, just like on your house, that means less corrective maintenance needs to happen, and that corrective maintenance is always the expensive stuff. That's when things break. So here's just a breakdown of the 49 applications that we received to cover the 29 and 30 fiscal years. And this is all just conglomerated, not broken out into the different types of funding or the different urban areas. But you can see the request was basically double what was available. And so some of those projects are specific to certain types of funding, and those will be funded fully where other parts might not be able to be. Of note, the 5337 projects, those are basically all of the things other than operating and preventive maintenance that NICD does. So it's upgrades to their systems, to their substations, their technology, if they've got bridge repair, rail repair, new vehicles, all of that stuff is eligible for that 5337 funding. You know, one of the things that Kelly often mentions when she talks about the cost of operating rail is that unlike the other transit operators, they have to build their own road. So this funding helps with that category of cost. And then the fiscal constraint tables, like Charles discussed, we've got here Valparaiso Sherwood Forest, Michigan City Report, and the Chicago area. It's worth noting that 2030 is an illustrative year, so that is not required to show fiscal constraint, though we try to do so anyway, so that we're not forecasting to have, you know, double the funding that we really anticipate having. Public comment, Scott talked about this. We had the same meetings that he had for those two projects. The 30-day plan, or the 30-day public comment period was from March 22nd, April 20th. And while we only were required to have one public meeting, we did opt to have one in each county to help make that more accessible to the public. And there were some general questions asked from the handful of people that did attend, but they didn't have any comments about any of the projects specifically that needed to be addressed. So just a little bit of a background of the timeline and the timeline moving forward. We started this process in September, then that went through November for the notice of funding availability. In November, we started the internal review of applications and then moved on through December into sort of the working groups for the different categories of funding to take another look at the applications and say, okay, which of these need to be included, which of these don't score high enough to get moved forward or are not things that we have the option to do right now. Last meeting in March, we brought forward the list to say, hey, we think we're ready for this to go out to public comment, and that was suggested that we do that. We moved forward with the comment period, and then here we are today, asking for a recommendation to the commission. And then 15th, we hope to take this to the commission for approval, and then that'll go forward to NDOT and USDOT, and we hope that they will be ready to approve it sort of in the middle of the summer. Obviously, sometimes those take time, but hopefully we've got everything ready and they'll have a good, quick review on it. So here's that requested action. Again, is for a favorable recommendation.
So, are there any questions or comments for Charles or Stephen at this point?
Got a few comments.
All right, I think you need it.
Well, I may have mentioned this when we started the public comment period. Actually, I remember sitting next to one of my colleagues to answer the question or ask some of the questions. We weren't getting the transit information as forthcoming as we had in the past. Maybe we got a little bit, I don't know. We made assumptions that we were going to get the same level of transparency as in the past. And we really need to get to that between the NERC staff and the operators, particularly the designated recipients. We don't have a current copy of the spreadsheet of our projects. And this is something that, if it's not sitting in front of us when we make the amendment or when we make the request for approval, it's something that's sent beforehand. We need to get back to that. We're going to be amending the tip just after it's approved and just after it goes live. We need to have that level of communication between the staff and the operator so that we have some knowledge of what we are approving. In terms of the upcoming Transit Operators Roundtable, which we're going to be having later on this Thursday, right? Mm-hmm. Right. I'd love to use that to start the process of getting that information out to the operators and sub-grantees so that when we come back for a potential amendment in August, we can right-size our projects, take the split that we agreed to for 2026, extend it to 2030, just so we have a working vocabulary between the designated recipients. This is a cooperative process, and I know I've shared my frustration with Stephen via email, but we do want to get to a level of cooperation between staff and operators. Lastly, I'm going to get back on that soapbox. The public comment opportunities, the one in Lake County, that's at least a half-mile walk from the nearest transit stop to the Lake County Public Library. Yes, that will be the case in a few months. We will be providing service to the library, but we should acknowledge that the people who are most affected and most impacted by the decisions that we make should have the opportunity to comment on those decisions that we make. So I'm not going to vote no on this approval because I know it's going to pass. We need to have it, but I can't vote on it because I think the process needs to be improved.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? If not,
I can just make one comment. In addition to the public meetings that were held,
there was also the opportunity to comment online.
Right.
Through the NERC website. So there were multiple comment opportunities in addition to the public meetings.
One thing that I can add,
though it's a point well taken.
right, one thing I can add that maybe a suggestion as right, taking it from other processes. We're doing the age-friendly community surveys for the city of Gary. And what AARP and the city of Gary did was they sent us flyers that have the QR code for the online version of the survey. And we put those out. So people aren't picking up the entire survey, because I'm not sure people want to carry out our entire tip when they come picking the bus pass. But having a flyer with the QR code, that way they can pick it up and then they can comment or they can take a look at the program. So when we next have something go out for public comment, transit or not, send us an 8.5 by 11 with a QR code and information so that we can at least use that to provide a portal for getting information to the public.
8.5, 11.
Just something we can print out. Yeah, something we can print out and put in our front lobby.
But a fact sheet.
A fact sheet, and if there's input requested or invited, a QR code that someone can use. I mean, they can use that. They can scan it while they're waiting for information at at the front desk. That way, even if we can't get the information physically to people via a meeting, we can at least have that information available to them via a scan.
And that's a good point. And one of the things that our public participation plan, we're looking at some revisions to it. We're going to do some technical revisions, but then we're also looking at some more categorical revisions. And so that's something that I may be talking to you about between here and there to see, kind of what that looks like in practice and see if that's something that should be included.
It's another way of doing outreach in relatively inexpensive ones. Appreciate it.
And if I can make one additional point, again, point well taken on transit accessibility for public meetings.
I will just say, for the sake of the record, that our public participation plan requires that we hold only a single public meeting. We did hold 3 public meetings, so we did exceed the requirements of our public participation plan.
Can we adjust the public participation plan to have 1 meeting per county as part of your modus operandi? I know raising the level of the minimum isn't something we usually do, but if you're going to go ahead and do it, you might as well have that reflected in the plan, and maybe that'll hold some weight at Region 5. Something to think about. If you're going to, especially if you're going to
As Stephen mentioned, we will be making some updates probably over the summer. We'll be reviewing those and thinking about those internally, so we can definitely give that some thought at that time.
Suffice to say, the fact is we did outreach to 3 different counties. And I'll mention that former staff member Kevin Polite, who now works for an engineering company, showed up at the meeting in Porter County. I appreciate former staff coming who have some knowledge of what the operations are here and getting some of their feedback as well. Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir.
I probably need Charles's help, but from the non-transit side, right, we're adopting a tip that basically added 2 projects to the tip. Am I right, Charles? Right, on the federal highway STBG funding, when we went through the NOFA process, there was limited number of projects that were added to the tip. And so, to me, approving the tip, and I appreciate Mr. Wright's comment about he's for approval, but in terms of transparency, there's very few additions to STDB, CMAQ, HSIP funds that are available in the tip. Charles?
Yes, that is correct. It had been discussed widely for the last couple of years that we have some transformational projects in the region that needed to see through to completion. So what and like I said, it had been discussed verbally, nothing had been written down because we couldn't approve a tip in an out year, those years 6, 7, 8. So we did approve, and those transformational projects are Kennedy Avenue in Cherville, Porter County's Willow Creek Road, as well as Klein Avenue in St. John. Those projects, we did advance those projects, and therefore with the fact that we did lose some funds because of the Lake of Four Seasons urbanized area, which is now not part of ours. We still have 2 projects in that area that we funded originally and continuing to fund to get those through. But because of the constraints that we have, we were not allowed to. We thought we were going to have some projects through the last NOFA, but with those constraints, the NOFA that we had last fall wasn't as robust as we would have liked. So therefore, we didn't have any projects. Actually, the 2 projects that you mentioned, Dean, were in LaPorte. So those were 2 new roads at LaPorte, Wishes, and actually they were the only 2 projects that Michigan City, LaPorte urbanized area submitted. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Any other questions, comments? If not, can I have a motion for a favorable recommendation for resolution 2511?
Move to make a favorable recommendation for 2511 to the full commission.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second? Aaron, are you making a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Gaddis made the second. Any other comment? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? So moved. We'll forward it on with a favorable recommendation to the full commission, May 15th. Next, we have a report from planning partners, starting with Plain Cities.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Or I should say Dry Clean Indiana now.
Go by many names. I'm gonna try and jump over here. Happy birthday, Kay, once again. We do have some funding that we're gonna be coming out with here. Actually tomorrow. And so it's related to charging infrastructure funding. And so it's going to be, we have about 3.2 million for DC fast charging stations, up to $200,000 per location that would cover up to 75% project costs. And then we have about $180,000 for level 2 charging stations, just like the one you see outside NERC all the time. That's up to 75%, up to $10,000 per location. And this is open. Press release is coming out tomorrow. We're going to be doing a road show June 9th through the 20th. And on the 20th, we're going to be in Hammond at the South Shore Visitor Center from noon to 2 to discuss this and present on this. We will have light food and beverages. And then applications are due by June 30th. And this is going to be moving relatively fast, and it's a great opportunity to deploy these charging stations in needed locations, especially for projects that Mr. Button has in Hammond, for example. We have Tesla wall charging donations. We have 52 universal wall chargers and 26 pedestals that we are going to be deploying across Northwest Indiana. City of Hobart recently installed one of theirs, and for half the month of April, they've received over 100 $80 of net revenue to the city for their usage in just a half a month, which is insane. The next is the locations. First time in history, NIPSCO will be giving away free electricity at the charging stations associated up here with the Go EVI and charging stations as they transition to a new software from Shell Recharge to EV Connect. So over the next couple of weeks, these stations are set to free, so it's like getting free gas for your electric car. So that is upcoming. And then we have there's gonna be some funding coming up over the summer as well, but it's gonna follow exactly the funding that we had that was due back on the 28th of February. We submitted over 3 port projects, 1 construction project, and propane garbage truck for Wying. This was a diesel emission reduction. So you must replace a diesel vehicle with a on-road vehicle as part of the process. There will be about $5 million available coming out here. Next stuff that we're talking about is basically related to a bunch of programs that have been canceled or put on pause for future. But that's all we have. I just want to make sure that there's some mention of the events that are coming up. We have Air Quality Awareness Week this week. We have the Partners for Clean Air Luncheon at the Hammond Marina from 11:30 to 2 p.m. On June 12th. And then once again, our Go EVIN infrastructure funding tour, which is called Closing the Gap Tour, is going to be from noon to 2 at the South Shore Convention Center on June 20th.
Questions for Ryan?
Okay.
The Partners for Clean Air generally has a scholarship
Yes.
process. For the people hopefully watching on YouTube, can you just go over that a little bit? I know that's not your responsibility, that's items, but
Yeah.
try to get the word out as much as possible.
So the scholarships were actually due on April 30th.
Never mind then.
So I know that there was some submittals, but it's past due.
My bad.
Keep it in mind for next year. Any other questions for Ryan? If not, we have acceptance of committee appointments.
We received no.
We received no appointments, and then we have some staff announcements.
Yeah, I've actually got a slide, so I'm gonna pull up this slide real. Grace, are you gonna pull that slide up? Thank you. Just really very briefly, since we won't be meeting in June or July, I've got some staff updates on some of the projects that we've been working on and some things that are coming up. First, as it relates to the Marquette Greenway, implementation of the Marquette Greenway project using Raise and Ready grant funding continues. NERC has selected Lockmuller Group to handle engineering services for the West Gary phase of the Marquette Greenway. The first phase of that work will involve route analysis over the summer. That's in Gary, with another contract planned for design in August. We're still awaiting word from FHWA on an amendment to our grant agreement, which is necessary to commence right-of-way acquisition in Michigan City. Additionally, the Friends of the Marquette Greenway, which is a separate entity, recently raised over $50,000 to match a Lilly Endowment Challenge grant to put their holdings to over $100,000 raised to aid with the completion and perpetual maintenance of the trail. Sensible Tools, if you need any more information on that, please contact Mitch Barloga. NERC, in partnership with Purdue Extension and the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant, recently held 2 workshops for the Sensible Tools Handbook. The workshops' purposes were for participants to learn and apply the tools of the handbook for reviewing municipal planning projects and developer applications for future developments. The first workshop focused on the role of public planning officials, zoning basics, and ethical considerations. Second workshop emphasized using community planning for green infrastructure through assessments of planning and zoning ordinances.
Both workshops included presentations and activities facilitated by Purdue Extension staff and a mock Plan Commission breakout activity in which participants used Sensible Tools handbook checklists to evaluate actual site plans. Those are the photos on the screen here. About 40 people, including planners, elected officials, environmentalists, and others interested in municipal planning, attended both workshops. NERC distributed a survey after the workshops and received generally positive feedback. So we plan to conduct these workshops again. And we hope to have more participation from city and town council members, plan commissioners, and BZA members. So for those of you on the committee with those relationships, we would appreciate that you, when the notices do come out, that you forward them on to those elected and appointed officials. Road safety, if you have any questions on that, please talk to Iman Ibrahim. Road safety audits, an update on that. We will be conducting a second round of road safety audits this summer. We're currently reviewing and formatting regional crash data and compiling a list of locations in the region that have either high crash frequency or high crash costs. So we expect to complete that list and that mapping activity by the end of this month, after which we will open up a solicitation for RSA locations. And our intent is to focus RSAs on these identified high crash locations or locations that have been identified in the local safety action plan. So we think that we'll probably, given the funding that we have left over, we think we'll be able to complete 9 to 10 RSAs this round. The funds or the projects will be funded through HSIP. They were programmed at an 80-20 cost share on this round though, so we will require the LPA to cover the local match, which we anticipate to be about $1,700 per location, so per RSA. For more information on that, please see Charles Bradsky, but I would just pay attention over the next couple months. We'll be sending out some information via email on that project. As was mentioned by David, right, we have a Transit Operators Roundtable meeting this Thursday, the 8th at 10 a.m. It will be a virtual meeting, and the agenda includes an update on the TIP, a reminder about asset condition reporting, and an update on the current status of vehicle procurement. Please see Stephen Hughes with any questions. And then finally, we have recently added a census data page to our website, and Grace will go ahead and click on that. She can pull that up. This is a web page, or a page on our website. It includes a set of links to the census website, but because that website can be a bit hard to navigate, we put this page together, and we hope it could make it easy for communities to access census community snapshot data. So we'll see if we can pull that up. If not, here we go. Okay, so you can see that it's very easy to access the information for your communities. You just click on the tab where at the county, click on the link for your community, and this will take you directly to the community snapshot page for your particular community on the census website. So again, it's a bit slow to load on this, but you can see that it includes quite a bit of information that's beneficial for planning activities and grant applications and those types of things. Again, it's census data with links on our website, so you can easily navigate to it and get that information for your community.
And I thank you, because it is very difficult to navigate the census. I've been doing it for years and trying to find the information you want, but be aware that it's not going to be specific to wards or precincts. It's going to be general information for the municipality, which is still part of what you're going to be filling out of grant applications and in your dealings with the state and fed.
Is this 2020 census data or is it estimated data?
What's shown, it should have a source for each. I believe the 2023 American Community Survey estimates are what's being displayed.
So you're projecting, not.
Right, right.
We're
but-
not projecting.
I'm sorry, the website is not.
Right.
It'd be awesome if we could, but
Right.
This-
I just wanted to be clear what the source of the information
Yeah.
was, right?
Right, it should list for each item what number it's pulling from, what
Thank you.
survey or actual count.
So different data is collected in the decennial census versus what's projected in, or estimated in the American Community Survey, so they're using whatever is the most recent data available for that particular topic.
it makes our lives easier as engineers. That's one of the things we had to learn how to do was project population for wastewater treatment, water supply, for transportation networks, et cetera. And now the government's pretty much taking care of that.
Thank you.
That concludes my staff updates.
Any other announcements? Mary?
Just want to thank you because Lake County Community Services is enjoying their 2 new buses. And we're anticipating purchasing another 2 buses and as soon as we get the funds for them. The second thing is we're looking for updates from Kelly regarding the Monon corridor coming hopefully soon. So I will be contacting her so we can get some community involvement.
Very good, thank you. I'll just announce that the Leadership Committee meets on May 13th at 8:30 a.m. And then NERC full commission will be May 15th. And we'll be receiving the resolutions that were forwarded today with favorable recommendation. Any other comment?
One quick item. In 2009, the Sherrville Town Council directed me to start working on the Kennedy Avenue transitional project here with NERC. Thanks to all the NERC staff that have helped over the years. Phases 1 and 2. Phases 1 is the bridge. Phase 2 are the skirts to the bridge. Are out to let due tomorrow. Thank goodness. 16 years later, here we are.
Well, thank you for illustrating that too. With all of our projects, please be patient because it just takes a lot of time. It's a powerful bureaucracy, but it's worth it. Any other thing good for the cause? Okay.
I'll just, we don't appreciate one another as much as we should, and I just want to share with you as representatives of the full commission that the transportation staff at large has always been very receptive when I call with a question, a concern, an explanation. I don't get it, answer for me, and very timely. And I appreciate Tom and his staff, Charles and such, Meredith, and who else? That's everybody. I mean, it's really nice to work with everybody. Wish we saw you more in the office a little bit more, but.
I'll second that because we're constantly making improvements and these people handle the business of transportation for the region very well. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to Kate Nelson.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Kate. Motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
How many seconds do I have?